All right, last but not least, I'm going to talk about what used to be the ultimate ArcGIS tools. Now, there's a problem because this works with ArcMap. We developed it with ArcMap. And then working with ArcGIS Pro, ArcGIS Pro is preventing us from sub-launching other programs, and we don't know why. They're just doing that. So it actually prevents this from working. This will still work with ArcMap, and I'm going to go through it because there's a couple pieces in here that are important in any situation that you get into. But the general idea was we've got ArcMap up here, we've got a tool that we can build inside of ArcMap, and then the tool's called Python scripts. And if we're having trouble with compatibility with different versions of Python, which in the case of ArcMap it used to be 2.6, now it's 2.7, which was really limited, and we really wanted to be running stuff in 3. We could actually take a Python script and have it launch another Python script that was in Python 3. And in this case, we could then launch R and do anything we wanted. Again, this is giving us this huge amount of flexibility. So here what I've done is created a couple scripts, and I provided them as zips because when I provide them as Python scripts inside the web browser, we just have too many problems with the tabs and everything coming over. It did not work well. And so I'm just going to go ahead and extract these, and you'll see there's a couple of scripts there. The regression tool, or sorry, our regression, so you may want to look at it, and then the regression tool, and this is one that work with ArcMap. I'm not going to talk too much about that. And I'm going to walk back over here and go through the instructions. So we've got our regression, so that's this script. We then want to go into Excel and create a CSV with 10 numbers in it. This one has a few more than 10, but that should be okay. And we're going to save that as inputs.csv. Make sure the path to R is correct for your computer. So let's go into Wing, and let's load up this regression. And what you'll see here is we have a bunch of imports. So we're using not only subprocess, but some other standard libraries. Printing out the version just because I tend to do that so I can make sure I'm running the right version of Python. Loading up some Qt stuff for a little bit of GUI. And then I also load up Pill or Pillow, which does the image processing. Notice here I've got my working folder at temp, and then I've got R at 5.2. So what we want to do is we do want to go to our C drive, program files, R, and here's the version of R I have, and they are the same. Of course, that's because I just updated this, but you want to make sure it's the same so we can get into the bin file and get into the REXE, and that's what we're going to launch here. So this is a path to here. You want to make sure that's correct. And then this is one of the really tricky parts, is what we're going to do is we're going to create an R script as a string inside of our Python program. So this is the whole script except for a little bit we're going to add to the top. Now, the really powerful part about this is that we can create any script we want, right? We can, in Python, we can do text processing, we can make scripts, and then we can send them to R. We can write out the input files for R, write out a script, and then have the script write out output files, and we can read those output files back through Python, allowing us to automate virtually any program like R that takes input files, does processing, and does output files. So again, very powerful approach to get lots of flexibility. A little bit of an advanced approach, but this is R code. If you haven't messed with R, that's okay. Just think about being any program, and I do recommend it for statistical stuff. And then you'll see here we've got our main dialog class without the documentation that it should always have. And I'll update that later. And then we have our initialization code. Now in this case, our initialization code does a number of things. One is we grab this global, the R script, we add a couple labels, and then we start setting up some things. Here's our plot titles by default. So the title of the plot, the X and Y axis labels. And then just as an example, I go ahead and pull those from the command line. So you can specify those from the command line. And then I add those to the R script. This is the notation to have a line continue to the next line in Python. And here's the R script. And so I'm just adding this stuff onto the front end of the script. So these are R parameters. So I'm moving those values from the command line into Python and then into our R script. Then we go ahead and write out that R script. And I should probably go ahead and run that to show you what's happening. Okay, where did our temp file go? Here we are. So now you can see that we have an R script. If we open that up, you will see that looks a lot like what we had before, except I've added some variables to the top. R doesn't worry about spaces. I should fix that anyway. I'm not sure why those are there. Oh yeah, there's a space after my ends. Oh, the software is never done. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. Run it again. Back to Notepad. It's going to ask us to reload it. Yeah, that looks better. Okay, so there's some parameters. And we've got our folder path. So this is the rest of this is just the R code that I have up here written to a file. And now what we can do is we can go ahead and tell R to run that script. And it's going to output the console. So what you would normally see in R if you were running it would go to the command line, but we don't have a command line, so instead we call it redirecting it to the console output. And sure enough, here's the output from R as it was running. So this is very valuable for debugging, right? If it doesn't work, we can go to the console and look at what will happen. Also, we have our output results. Hey, here's the results of our linear regression. There's the intercept, and there's the slope for the variable x. Cool. And then we also get a plot. Ta-da! There's our data with our linear regression. All right, so that's it. Oh, I should have mentioned that well, let's see, we're not doing the shapefile yet. That's the next step. Okay, now there's some work here to get that graph into Qt, into a Qt dialog. We do that with the QPixMap, send it the path to the GIF, and then we can set that into our graph label, and then go ahead and resize the windows so that that fits. So as we step, oh, and then we're not displaying it yet. Displaying it will happen down here. We can then go into our output results, and we're going to pull out those values, specifically that line. We had to go down to that line, so that we could pull out those values for the intercept and the slope. And then we can go ahead and create a string that has our equation in it, put that into our text label, and show our dialog. I'm going to have to run it so that that can update. There's our equation, and there's our graph. So this shows running R underneath a Python script, so it's sub-launched. Cool, fun stuff. When writing this kind of stuff, it does take a while. Don't feel like, you know, this is going to just happen. It takes a while. First, I create the scripts in R, get them working in R, including the documentation. Then I go ahead and add variables to the top of them in Python and test it, make sure it works, and then go from there. Really briefly, I'll talk about the regression tool because this is an ArcMap tool. And what you'll see is that here we're going into a shapefile, and we're going to use shapefile.py. You could reuse ArcPy if you wanted to, but I'm going to use shapefile.py. Now, one of the challenges with doing Arc tools is the way you get messages into ArcGIS, so you can see them in the history for your tool, is through this arcpy.message. But when we're not running under Arc, we do them through print. So I wrote this little program, and all it does is check to see, is my print, checks to see if we're running in a tool, which you can tell if we have arguments, okay, or if we're running in a debugger, which wouldn't have any arguments. And I use that to switch between the two modes of printing so I can see what's going on. Again, we've got some paths to things, including where to run Python. And then I've got a shapefile and some attributes, field synonymous with attributes in Esriland. And these are defaults. And then I go in here, and this determines if we're running underneath ArcGIS. So ArcGIS will pass us parameters on the command line, the debugger won't. So this is how I can tell if we're running as a tool. Oh look, add a message, running tools. And if we're running as a tool, then I go ahead and use get parameters text to pull the name of the shapefile and the attributes from the tool. So if we're in ArcGIS and we are running a tool, as I was just doing, okay, here's those three parameters, my shapefile, and then the fields that you want to pick. Those will come in as arguments when I hit run. As soon as I hit run, it fails here because Esri won't let us sub-launch. But those would come in here. And then I just print them back out to the history so I can make sure that I've got them while I'm debugging. And then we go in ahead and read the data from the shapefile and write it into our inputs.csv file. And then we go ahead and find the indexes for the fields so we can tell which ones to write out, and we write out those values, and then we close the file. So this is preparing the inputs.csv. And then we go ahead and there's our path to Python. So this would be going to our Python script that does linear regression. There it is. And then we pass in parameters. There they are, including the title, x-axis, y-axis label, the working folders, temp, and then the Python console output. And then we go to run that. And there's some prints in here so we can see what's going on, and then some error checking because we do get a number of errors, but it works. So the next step would then be to take this and after you get it done at this level, go ahead and make it into a tool inside of ArcMap. And I tried to do a direct call to our regression script, but it failed launching R. The regression tool script failed launching the sub process that had Python in it. So it does look like ArcGIS Pro is preventing us from sub-launching for some reason. Maybe I'm missing something, extra credit for someone who figures that out.